Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry to Gar. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Bravo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the NBA and the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, aka Podcast Boy, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, David Nash. David, it's been a little while. How you been? How's your trip?
It has been a while, Max. I'm on the back end of a 2-week trip, as you just said. It was okay, but work is work at the end of the day. But a little jet lagged here, which should be interesting for the pod. Hopefully I don't say anything too ridiculous or fall asleep halfway through and get non-responsive to you.
Hopefully for our entertainment, you do say ridiculous things. But fortunately, we have reinforcements today. We brought in a guest. Our guest for today's episode is an NBA draft writer for The Stepien, as well as the relatively new host of The Stepien's fantastic draft podcast, along with the great Mike Gribanoff. His name is Ross Homan. Thanks for joining us, Ross.
Hey, how you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Besides, so how long have you been the host of The Stepien podcast now for? Like a few weeks?
Yeah, only about 4 episodes, I believe, now that Jackson isn't able to do it anymore.
Yeah, Jackson went to a front office somewhere. I actually don't know where. Did he say yet, or is that still secret?
Yeah, I think it's still a secret, so.
Okay, well, that's awesome. I love Jackson. But happy to have you here. It's exciting that you've gotten that opportunity. I know you're going to kill it with it.
Yeah, Ross is doing a great job on that one, Max, and it's been great to listen to him and Mike on some of the lesser-known prospects that I am definitely not up with at the moment. So for any Suns fans or anyone else listening who haven't listened to that pod, if you want to scratch up maybe on some guys at 32 or later in the draft that the Suns might take, definitely jump on board that one.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we brought on an actual NBA draft expert for our 2019 NBA mock draft, which we're going to do with I call it a 7 seconds or less style twist. So Ross and David are going to trade off picks and give their explanations for why they picked each player with each team. And by the way, they'll be picking on what they think each team should do, not what it will do, although within reason, right? They're not going to take Brandon Clark at number 2 like I would. They're going to do things that the teams might actually do. And then after each pick, I'm going to either react to the pick, probably for the guys we've spoken less about because the listeners have heard enough about guys like Zion and such. Mm-hmm. So for guys like Zion and such, I'm going to, instead of reacting to the pick, I'm going to bring up like a Suns-related or a league-related news story. As we've talked about earlier, David has gone a little while. We've been on a hiatus for the podcast, so we have a lot to catch up to. So we're going to throw that all in there. We're also going to do 7 seconds or less scattered throughout, and David might throw in a couple Did You Know facts. It's going to be fun. I'm excited for this, David.
Yeah, I'm really excited. As you said, we're going to jump straight into it and kind of mix our normal format throughout and get a lot of Ross's opinions too, because as you said, he's a far greater expert than you and I on this whole draft, and hopefully he doesn't show me up too much in this mock draft that will probably go around the lottery, I think, Max.
Yep, that's about what I'm thinking. It's about as far as I can go before I don't know who the players are anymore. So without further ado, Ross, you won the fake coin flip. You're going first. Don't keep us all in suspense, Ross. Who are the New Orleans Pelicans taking?
I'm going to go out on a limb and take Zion Williamson at number 1. I think everybody knows this is a pretty obvious pick right here. He's what I would call a generational talent, and very, very easy pick.
Memphis are devastated right now. Absolutely devastated.
I know.
They thought they had a chance.
I was actually kind of hoping we'd get to see a Jaren Jackson and Zion front court. But anyways, New Orleans is obviously looking to trade Anthony Davis, and they're getting a very easy transition here from one centerpiece to another centerpiece. So
yeah, part of me is like, that's not fair that they got to have 2 generational talents in a row, given that they screwed up the first one. But it is a whole different front office, and the city deserves it. So I'm gonna give them a pass. But let's move on to our first Suns-related tie-in here. So John Gambadoro, who recently unblocked me from 98.7 local radio.
Lucky you, Max.
Yeah, lucky me. Well, it's only good because now instead of having to go into our podcast account to see what he says, I can just look at my own account, which is nice. But anyway, so someone who's often compared to Zion Williamson, Julius Randle, apparently, according to John Gambardero, is interested in playing for the Phoenix Suns. Let's go ahead and start with David here. David, what do you think about the idea of Julius Randle playing for the Phoenix Suns next year?
Can it not happen, please, Max? That would be my initial reaction. But, there was mixed feelings all over the timeline on this report. And, I can certainly understand the people that are pro bringing Julius Randle on the team, even though I don't really agree with it. You and I essentially kind of harped all season long on various episodes about this team needing more NBA caliber players on it. So I can see the argument why people are like, if there's a guy like Julius Randle who wants to join the team, why would you turn your nose up to that? But as I'm sure we're about to get into here, there's probably many reasons that you would turn your nose up at it, Max.
Yeah, I certainly think so. Before I got into my idea, though, Ross, what do you think? As someone who's not a Phoenix Suns fan, someone who's just an NBA person who probably isn't evaluating this directly from the vantage point of the Suns, how do you feel about Randle? And then if you have any thoughts on it about Randle's fit with the Suns?
Yeah, so Phoenix is sort of in a tough spot because you always want to get as many good players as possible, but I just really am not a fan of the Randle and Ayton fit. It'd be a pretty poor defensive front court. You kind of want to put a rim protector with Ayton, somebody that can shoot a little more. So I'm definitely not a fan of paying what would probably be long-term money to Randle. Just really don't like the fit there.
Yeah, long-term and probably somewhat big money.
Yeah, I think that's a great point by Ross and you there, Max. I think it's something that sounds okay in June, in theory, and then July comes along and you kind of see the cost of it and probably some of the other alternatives that were on the market, and that's where you kind of go, hang on a minute, not sure we made the best choice there. But probably by far the biggest concern for me would be, it would kind of be signaling how the new regime thinks we should play around this young core. And as Ross noted, it would probably be long-term money for Randle. And I just think him with the core of Ayton, Booker, and McHale is pretty suboptimal. He's another poor defender in the starting five, below average shooter, even though, some have noted improving there. And probably worst of all, another ball-dominant guy, which is something that I definitely don't want with this young core, Max.
Yeah, I think my issue here is, and there's been some pushback on certain people on Suns Twitter who are saying things along the lines of, like, how could you possibly push back against an upgrade if you're a Suns fan right now? Like, we haven't won 25 games for 5 seasons in a row or whatever it is now. Like, how can we possibly push back against a player who's clearly a good NBA player and is an upgrade in one sense of the word? So my pushback on that would be, it depends on how you view the word upgrade, right? Like, is it an upgrade in just pure talent? Sure. But for me, I view everything in terms of how do you make the Booker, Ayton, McHale core into an eventual every season contender.
Yep.
And hopefully a title contender, but at least a playoff contender. And if you view the word upgrade that way, I think it's very easy to make an argument that Julius Randle isn't an upgrade. Because, first of all, opportunity cost, he will cost at least in the low 8 figures and possibly $15 million a year for several years, as Ross pointed out. And as you both did a good job pointing out, he's a good player in his own way. He's a good individual scorer. He's a good rebounder. By the way, those are the things Ayton does well. But he's really bad at defense. He's like one of the worst defenders. I think Evan Sidery, one of our friends, made the point, maybe even somebody else, that Ayton and Randle were the only bigs in the league who didn't have at least a block and a steal playing a certain threshold of minutes. That's not good. And then you also have the questionable shooting. He was better last year, but career-wise, not great. And then you have the waxing and waning effort level, which I'd put, as kind of the final nail in the coffin, like the 3 things you don't want next to DeAndre Ayton. So yeah, again, if you only view upgrade as, is he better than what the Suns had last year at the spot? Yes, he's better than Dragan Bender. I will grant you that. But is he really, given the costs he'll take and with the fit, is he really an upgrade in terms of will he help this core develop? That's a pretty strong no from me.
Yeah, exactly. I really strongly disagree as well with this whole notion of, disregarding team structure and just taking what we can get as Suns fans. As I said, I think it would be a move that we would soon regret, even though there might be a few people happy with the, immediate upgrade versus someone like Dragan Bender, as you said, Max.
All right, let's move on to the next selection. Memphis, number 2. David, who are you taking?
This is a really tough one for me. I think both you and Ross know who I like at number 2 on my big board. If I was just following straight off my big board, I'm sure most Suns fans listening also know who I love at number 2. But, there is the question of the value of the pick, the general consensus around the league with RJ Barrett and Ja Morant. So probably the first thing I'm doing here, Max, and I'm picking every even number pick here. So I'm going to lean on you to play the Lakers here. I'm going to call up the Lakers and see whether there's any interest from them in trading up to number 2 from number 4 at the moment.
Oh, wow. I did not expect this, but let's go. I'm ready. I am Rob Pelinka, so let me get my weird hat on.
So what do you say, Rob? Is there any interest in, we're on the clock, are you interested in trading up to number 2, I guess to maybe get someone like RJ Barrett or Ja Morant?
Well, one second. Can I three-way ping in David Griffin as Ross here and see if the Pelicans have interest in number 2? Because that's my answer from the Lakers.
Well, you've got the angle there right from me. That's kind of what I'm going with here, is maybe the number 2 pick and therefore RJ and Ja is a lot more attractive in a package for Anthony Davis. So yeah, let's throw to Ross there as David Griffin. And is it any more interesting to you for a Davis package there, Ross, if either RJ or Ja is in the package for Anthony Davis?
Yes. It would be, just from a get as many good assets as possible situation. Yeah. If the Lakers were able to move up to 2, it would definitely bring additional value for the Davis trade.
Yeah, so let's look at it. Let's do it this way. So David Griffin, aka Ross, which of the young core of the Lakers do you not like very much? Who's the one that has a lot of value, and I could probably swing to Memphis, but you would rather me trade number 4 and this guy for number 2?
I would probably go with Lonzo as my favorite, so not him.
Okay.
And then, if it was possible to swing Kuz, definitely Kuzma. I'm somebody that's a little lower on him.
Memphis, where are you at in Kuzma?
Wow, Ross just got me very excited by saying Lonzo Ball there. I was about to ring in the trade call, and then he let me down gently. But with this trade, as I was saying at the top, I'm looking to draft Jarrett Culver and get really any asset out of moving back. I think I was initially probably hoping for maybe a future first round pick from the Lakers, but yeah, I would take Kuzma as part of this deal because I'm still getting the guy that I want. However, there is one other phone call that I need to make sure that the Knicks don't stuff up my plan here and take Jarrett Culver at number 3, Max. But if that was the framework of the deal and we're all happy with that, I'd be looking to get that one done.
Ross, would you take Culver over Barrett? Can we do this?
Ooh, now that you're no, I would not. No.
Okay, so we can make this deal then. So the parameters are the Lakers are trading Kuzma and the number 4 pick to the Memphis Grizzlies for number 2. Is that right?
Yep, I'm all in on that.
And I'm guessing Morant's the one who's going to be picked here to go to New Orleans in the Anthony Davis trade.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So this is quite a thing. I did not expect this to happen. This is fun. So Anthony Davis is coming to the Lakers, I imagine, and basically we'll just trade you everything. So number 2, which is Morant, you get Ingram, you get Lonzo, I guess Hart if you want him. I don't know why you would, but if you want him, and there you go. That's true. That was fun.
It's exactly how I kind of imagined it going down, Max, which is interesting because, we're not faking anything here. I did not bring this up with either you or Ross before jumping on the podcast, so quite interesting to run through that one. But Ja Morant and Zion Williamson together in New Orleans is very interesting.
Yeah, since that'll probably never happen, Ross, give us your analysis of what that would look like. What do you think it would be like to have Zion and Ja together?
I would like it. I trust Ja to be at least good enough as a catch-and-shoot guy, and same with Zion. And obviously they played AAU together when they were younger, so I'm sure they know each other decently well. I know some people are a little worried about Morant being able to scale back usage, but he had no problem with that his freshman year, and I think that concern's a little overblown. So I'd be very happy to have my starting core with Zion and Morant.
It'd certainly be exciting. I mean, that's the team I'd want to watch the most in League Pass, I think. That'd be insane.
All right. Well, maybe for the formalities here, Max, we should get Ross to make his number 2 and 3 pick, and then you've probably got a couple of other topics for us to jump into here.
Yeah, let's go to Ross. I have to save my Ja Morant. We went up on Ja Morant, so I'll save my thing on him. But yes, Ross, go ahead and make your picks at 2 and 3, and then we'll move on.
So, yes, for 2, I'm picking for the Pelicans, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm picking Ja Morant at number 2 just because I kind of want to swing big on the upside. And then, like I said, I like the pairing with Zion, and then he'll be able to learn under Holiday, and that'll help take a lot of pressure on him at first. So I definitely like the fit between that team.
Mm-hmm.
And then how about New York? So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to New York here. New York's sitting at 3. New York's pissed off because Anthony Davis is gone. They had the Kyrie thing happen already. They know they're not getting Kyrie. They're already scared. Kevin Durant's like not returning the text anymore. So what's New York going to do here?
I'm still going with RJ. He has a good upside, and then also just being in a big market, it's always smart to factor in trade value just in case, because you never really know. Obviously, it's not looking promising for them with like the top tier free agents, but just when you combine RJ's ability and then trade value, RJ at 3 is pretty easy for me right now.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. It's what I would have done. Speaking of RJ Barrett, Canada is sort of in the news in the NBA world right now.
Yes, they are.
The Toronto Raptors might win the title. Let's start with Ross here. Ross, if Toronto pulls this off and beats the Warriors, Katie or not, whatever, where does this rank for you in terms of surprise champions since you've been alive?
Decently high, just when you go all the way back to like the trade to begin with was a surprise. So like just factoring everything from a far out lens is pretty high because obviously Durant getting hurt is not expected. Iggy's playing hobbled, Looney. And then just, that trade to begin with is, like, the more you look at it, the more absurd it was.
Yeah. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Ross. I think it's funny. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter the last few days as the Raptors, win off these games and look one step closer. And maybe by the time people are listening to this, they may even be the eventual champions. But Masai's getting a lot of credit here for what I thought was a pretty no-brainer trade at the time. Great to leverage it and get the best deal. But, I remember discussing it at the time with you, Max, it was really a no-brainer in the fact that they could just rebuild if Kawhi walked away and they got off DeRozan's contract and really didn't give a hell of a lot up, didn't have to give Pascal up, didn't have to give OG Anunoby up. So, just a great trade, but I think we're maybe overplaying it just a little bit in terms of the heist that a lot of people have said and just how smart Masai has been. But, a quick did you know aside here for you, Max. I went back and listened to our predictions episode, and did you know I basically got everything wrong in that episode except for the fact that I tipped Toronto to at least come out of the East, and I also tipped that to be on the back of a mid-season trade to put them over the top. So I'm feeling pretty good at least about those 2 predictions from our pre-season predictions episode, Max.
Yeah, that's pretty damn solid because the Marc Gasol trade absolutely was important. I don't think they're here right now without him. Because people kind of forget that Toronto had to go to 3 overtimes against Milwaukee even to get here.
Yes.
In Game 3 where they would have gone down 3-0. Like, that very easily could have been Milwaukee's series. So, that's kind of the way the playoffs work. It's great. Just to quickly answer my own question, then move to number 4. I think it's an incredibly big surprise. Before the season started, some people were, saying Toronto was like a sleeper here. And I get that, but like, I like to take it more like go back to remember last playoffs when LeBron swept Toronto in like the most embarrassing possible way because people thought Toronto had a chance in the series and LeBron beat them in 4 games. If I would have told you right after that series ended that Toronto would win the title the year after that, you would have just straight up not believed me.
Yep.
You would punch me in the face and laugh at me when I cry on the ground. So it's amazing. I love it. It's great. I hope it happens. And as David said, people who are listening later may have already known it happens. All right, number 4, the Memphis Grizzlies move down. David, this is another obvious pick because I know who you are, but who is Memphis taking, David?
It is an obvious pick. So before I go to that, I'll follow up the did you know with one of my famous quizzes that I like to put you on the spot with, Max.
God damn it.
Ross can jump in here and be very impressed if he can get one of these, but there's been 4 players that have played for Golden State, Toronto, and the Phoenix Suns, Max. Can you name me one of them?
Let's go to Ross on this one.
Oh, man. I have no idea.
Did Barbosa ever play for Toronto?
Hey!
Got one. Got one. All right, I'm going to retire there. You asked for one.
Yeah, the other three are Jermaine O'Neal, Mikal Petrus, and Corey Blount.
Jesus.
Mikal Petrus, what a name.
Yeah, so now we're up to pick 4, which is essentially now Memphis's pick, as we all know after that little exchange earlier on in the episode. So we are now going to take who we rated as our number 2 prospect and got an extra asset out of it, Jarrett Culver from Texas Tech, who is my favorite player in the draft outside of Zion Williamson, and there's probably not too much more to say on that because everyone listening has probably seen and heard me go on about him more than enough, Max.
All right, Ross, here's my question on Jarrett Culver. I don't know if you saw, I think it was a little while ago, I don't remember how long ago, but Jarrett Culver said that the player he studies the most in the modern NBA is Jamal Crawford. Aside from the fact that it's hilarious, given Culver's David's favorite player in the draft and Crawford's my least favorite player in the entire league, how much, Ross, do you think we should factor in what players say about themselves into this kind of thing? Like, should we care that Culver said that he studies Jamal Crawford?
Probably not, because, I mean, if you take away specifics out of, like, Crawford's just skill level, it's not really a bad thing, but Culver just naturally has a lot higher of an IQ and plays tough defense, and just I wouldn't really worry about it as much as long as like the film doesn't really back it up, which in his case it doesn't.
David, what do you think?
I had a feeling this one might come up, Max. I'm with Ross. I don't put a lot into it, to be perfectly honest. I think as us amateur scouts, particularly you and I, Max, we tend to take more from these things because they're the only bits of information that we're getting. What I would say is it's probably important that the team, in an interview setting with Culver, finds out about, how he sees his game, because, particularly for someone like Culver and why I'm so high on him versus, say, RJ Barrett and Ja Morant is because, I really see Culver as being able to fit in as a secondary playmaker, not demand the ball so much, play good defense, kind of do everything that particularly this Suns teams needs, which, RJ and Ja, I think, are a little more alpha and feel like they need the ball all the time. So, if Culver shows some red flags in that sort of setting, I'm definitely getting a little bit more worried about him translating to the NBA or at least developing how I hope he would. But I'm not going to put too much into his comments about Kobe Bryant and Jamal Crawford, because I think, if anything, it's one of those moments where I feel really old again, Max, and realize how young these guys are and probably how little basketball they've seen outside of, I guess, the current day guys. And, you probably don't want to compare yourself to, current day guys, although I guess Jamal Crawford technically is still a current day guy, hopefully not next year in a Phoenix Suns uniform.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you guys. If it were like indicative of a trend of either the way he plays or just the things he repeatedly says, maybe I'd be concerned, but a one-off little comment, not going to concern me. Particularly the Kobe part of it, because I went and actually read where they came from. He said that his favorite players growing up were Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Welcome to every other NBA player. They all love those guys, so not concerned about that. I guess the Jamal Crawford tape thing's weird, but seems like a pretty easy thing to straighten out pretty quickly. All right, let's move to number 5, which I kind of view as like the wild card pick of this entire draft.
Yes.
Cleveland. Ross, what's Cleveland going to do?
Yeah, so this is not an easy pick now that the Lakers didn't actually take Garland, but I would probably just go with Goga Bitadze because he's my best player available, and Cleveland is not in the place to draft or fit at all. And I mean, it's not like the front court is very good anyways outside Love. Thompson's decent, but yeah, I just really like Goga. I would really like to see him in a beeline offense just with how good he is on the perimeter. He's not like a great perimeter, but for center he is. He's probably going to be somebody that shoots, could improve as a passer, but isn't by no means a bad passer.
Yeah.
And I'd be a little worried with Sexton being their long-term guard at the moment, defensive ceiling being capped, but I actually think Goga's pretty good on that end with he's obviously going to have to play drop coverage, but all around I think he's going to be a positive, especially throughout regular season defensively.
So 2 quick things on this. First, I love the pick for Cleveland, particularly because Cleveland's such a wild card. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. I think they're a major trade-down candidate with Atlanta.
Yeah.
But also, I'm glad you brought this guy up because I've heard a lot of people that I trust really like him, and I barely know how to pronounce his name, and have watched, the only time I've really watched him was just watch him shoot really well in a workout video. Because, he's a center, so I don't think the Suns are going to take him, so I don't focus too much on him. But Ross, just real quick for the listeners who, like me, haven't spent a ton of time on this guy, what's like, if he really works out, if he reaches a 90th percentile plus outcome, what is he doing for an NBA team in the playoffs?
We've kind of seen it with these playoffs, how like Gasol, obviously super high IQ, so he's kind of an outlier, but a lot of the bigger, like Jokic even, although he's offensively, if you have quick hands and good reaction time, you can have a little more leniency on your slow foot, but he's really good offensively. He's not going to be like a Jokic level offensive kind of guy, but not like a Max Vert guy, quick leaper. He's just, as simple as it sounds, he's just really good at basketball all around. And he's going to have, obviously, some problem in the playoffs, but at this point in the NBA, like, pretty much all bigs have problems in the playoffs. So I'm not terribly worried about him long-term playoff-wise, just because I think he's really good enough to, downplay some of the factors that go against him in a playoff setting.
David, what do you think? You have any Goga Batatse? Is that right? Thoughts?
I've seen people say it as Goja, so I'm going with Goja. But yeah, I'm not gonna. We're not going into pronunciations on this podcast, Max. He's an interesting one for me. People who follow me for a while, or even listen to the pod for a while, I can't remember whether I actually brought him up on one of the episodes or not, Max. But yeah, he was a guy that I was looking at as a draft and stash. Last draft for the Phoenix Suns until he withdrew because his stock was pretty damn low. But when I went back to this season's worth of film, I was just kind of flummoxed at the difference in player. Ross, I'm not sure whether you kind of saw that stuff from him, maybe 18, 24 months ago, but he looks a lot thinner, a lot more fleet of foot. As you say, he's still not overly quick on that end, but that was probably a major concern of why he was pretty low on people's boards last year. But, what he's done this season from a production standpoint compared to last, even in a 12-month jump, has been pretty phenomenal. And, this would be obviously a surprise to see him taken this far up in the draft. But yeah, I like the pick for Cleveland here because, they're not really tied to too many guys. Probably shouldn't even be tied to Sexton, but you should be taking best player available on your board. So I appreciate Ross doing that.
I like the Sexton shot.
I think it's definitely like a trade back spot, especially if Culver's gone. But it's kind of a draft too where like, how realistic is it to trade back? Because who are these later teams really targeting up top?
Yeah,
I think Cleveland's the team that would trade back though because they have reportedly have weird interests in this draft, and I could see Atlanta being the team to try to come up for Culver,
right?
If he's there and break David's heart. But we'll see on that one. We won't break David's heart early. Let's move to David though. David, number 6, the team called the Phoenix Suns are on the board. Your man's gone, so where are we going?
I'm kind of glad again that it's fallen this way because I think it kind of makes the point that I wanted to make here for Phoenix. I kind of expected for Garland to be off the board, which would have just strengthened the point. But, somewhat here with Garland still on the board, I think there's a discussion to be had around, not just taking a guy because of a suited need that a lot of Suns fans have pointed out, particularly at point guard. And again, I'm going to stick with BPA on my big board here, and I'm going to take Brandon Clark for the Suns, Max.
Yes! So originally, we weren't going to talk about Brandon Clark very much because I don't think they're going to take him, but our friend Mike Notham on Twitter just retweeted, I don't know what it was a Snapchat or Instagram pic or something, Brandon Clark showing that he is in Phoenix right now.
Yep.
He took a picture of himself in the Suns gym, presumably for a workout. Ross, we'll go to you. Should I get my hopes up? Is there any chance in hell the Suns would actually do what David just did and take Brandon Clark at number 6?
It really seems like it's trending to the point where like it went from a 0 possibility to at least a little bit of a possibility. If Culver is gone at 5 and they don't like Coby, there's really no like set position or set area for them to go. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's a little bit more of a possibility than it seems to be.
David, what do you think, man? Do you think, I know you just picked him, do you think now, we got this little picture we just got, do you think there's actually a chance to take him?
Yeah, I really do. I think that maybe they might try and get cute and trade back. But, I'm a guy that looks for clues, and they interviewed him at the Combine. He's from Phoenix, and now he's in their facility for what I believe is only their second individual workout behind Jarrett Culver. So I'm sure there's more workouts to come, but we can only look at the clues that are in front of us at the moment, and there is serious interest there from the Suns. Again, maybe if McD was still the GM, I'd think that they were maybe foxing a little bit and playing games, because I think he liked to do that. But I think this regime's a little more straight up and down. They kind of know what they want. They're going to be pretty black and white with their processes and really only have interest in the guys that they're really interested in. But, Max, particularly if we, look at it going Zion, RJ, Ja Morant, Culver, and maybe Garland at 5. It hasn't gone quite that way on our mock so far, but you're kind of looking at a spot where you're like, what do the Suns do and who do they take? And again, I would forget fit at this point of the draft, and I'd be taking the guy that I am the most confident in being a good NBA player going forward. And right now, at least for me, that would be Brandon Clark, Max.
Yeah, and for the Suns, he's also a fit. It kind of knocks a lot of boxes.
Yep.
But I love how you brought up McD, because I think there's no chance in hell I would not have my hopes up at all if McD was still the GM. Not only because he likes to screw around, but also he likes guys who are bad at basketball who might be good later. He doesn't like guys who are good at basketball now. That's not his thing. He hates guys who are good now.
I think now would be a good time to throw in my nickname for Sekou Doumbouya, which is an ode to you, Max, because I believe you gave me this idea. But his nickname is R.I.P. McD for that very reason that you just pointed out.
Oh, God. If he were still a GM, we'd actually have to worry about that. But, all right, let's sort of you, Ross. Number 7, Chicago Bulls are on the board. They just had the second best player in the draft go before them. So what are they going to do now that they're devastated?
Yeah, so I feel bad for Chicago in this situation, just because a lot of the players that are left are the ones that I like, at least, are front court, and Chicago's pretty much set on the front court. Mm-hmm. But if I was here, I would definitely just go ahead and take Coby White. It's a team that I'd kind of prefer to have an attacking point guard, one that can get to the rim a little better than Coby. But at this point, they don't really have a point guard. Dunn is decent, but their front court with Wendell, Laurie, Otto Porter, it's a really set, good front court, and I like the fit of those guys a lot. And there's a little bit worry about like Coby's creation area, which is understandable, but you can also run the offense through Levine, Laurie, and Wendell a little more too. So I like the fit, but just wish there was a little bit more talent here at number 7. Mm-hmm. But it's not really possible in this draft. It's not easy in this draft. So I would just go ahead and take Coby White at 7.
Yeah, Coby White would have been a great pick for the Bulls at number 14 if they had that pick instead.
Yeah, Ross, we've talked about both of these guys at length, so I'm interested to get your thoughts, because I keep flip-flopping back and forward on them as I watch both of them as well. So you had both Darius Garland and Coby White available here for you for the Bulls, and they need a point guard. So what's your kind of differing measures on taking Coby White over Darius Garland? What's kind of your feel on both of those two as prospects?
I have Coby, I think, just one spot higher. They're pretty much right next to each other for me.
Yep.
But Mike Gribbanov actually put me onto this sort of thing. But Garland is obviously a small sample size, but you can include like AAU in this also. Garland is not great at improvising. He kind of is consistently setting out of pick and roll, which obviously is a big deal in the NBA today. But Coby, I trust a little more with his improvisation, which I want in a point guard, being able to like break down late shot clock, and I trust him a little bit more as a passer as well. Mm-hmm. But they are very close for me, but just those two things make me lean Coby.
Interesting, Max. I'm not sure where you've fallen on them at the moment, Max. I've got them in a tier all by themselves. And yeah, hardly separated at the moment, and may even flip on them again before the draft. But what order do you have them in at the moment, Max?
I don't remember my exact rankings, but I have Garland quite a bit higher. And I acknowledge all the problems with Garland. I think there is a lot of downside risk with him. He's really one of the biggest boom bust projects I can kind of remember.
Yep.
Because he really knocks out of the park two of the most important skills you can possibly have, which are the off the dribble shooting and then the great handle. Mm-hmm. But then he's really bad at a lot of other things, as Ross pointed a few of them. And then the thing with Coby White, I'm more sure he'll be an NBA player, but I'm less. I don't really see any star upside with him. It'd be shocking to be a Coby White to star. Like, what does he do? Let me ask you this, Ross. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Is there anything Coby White does that makes you think there's a possibility he could be a star?
No. But with Garland, too, I feel like he'd have to become a complete outlier shot maker, kind of like McCollum, to get that level, and that's something that I try not to bet on. So, but yeah, no, I do agree that Coby does not really have a path to like being a true star unless he also hits that threshold of complete like outlier shot making.
So you're pretty damn low on. So where do you have Garland, like actual like ranking wise on your board?
13 right now.
Wow, so that's real low.
Yeah.
Okay, well, David, you don't have them that low, right?
No, I've got them both 6 and 7 at the moment, and kind of interchanging. I think it's a good point by Ross here in terms of, I think, at least for me, this is where the line is, where you've essentially dropped off a level to guys that just might project to be decent players, role players in the NBA. I guess Garland has that slight chance, as you mentioned, for me as well, at being a star in the NBA if everything goes 100% right for him. But, you know, for the rest of the teams we're about to pick for here, you're probably looking for nice role players rather than star upside from this point onwards, Max.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I'm a lot higher in Garland than you guys are. I have him. He's like 4 or 5 or something like that, and I think it's weird because I don't want my own team to take him. I think the Suns are not in a position to take a guy like Garland right now. But I think if I were like somebody like who is nothing on their roster right now, maybe even like Washington. If Washington got the 3rd overall pick, I would probably take Garland there. So I just swing up for a home run if I were them. But anyway, let's move on. We're at Atlanta. David, what are the Atlanta Hawks doing with the first of their 3 picks in the top 20?
Very interesting situation here with Garland on the board because there's absolutely no way you can pick him with Trae Young as your starting point guard. I'm, always BPA to a certain degree with my drafting. They've got a nice young core with Trae, Herter, even John Collins at power forward, a few other nice pieces. But I think Trae's the only one there that you wouldn't look at just drafting a guy that plays a similar position. I don't think Herter or Collins are anywhere near good enough that you wouldn't bring in another guy at their position, but Trae certainly is. So Garland's probably off the board for me, which leaves me with probably a few wing options. Probably either DeAndre Hunter or Cam Reddish. Maybe have the chance of getting both with another pick here at 10, but I'm gonna go with DeAndre Hunter as the solid pick here for Atlanta at number 8.
Ding, ding, ding! You hit on our first 7 seconds or less question. Ooh. I give 0 shits about DeAndre Hunter. All right, so all my 7 seconds or less questions are gonna be about basically comparing 2 offseason results for the Suns. Okay, 2 different scenarios. What you prefer. So we'll start with Ross here. On this one, the scenario plays out where the Suns have like about $50 million total in space under both scenarios. So just a background information. All right, so number 1, Suns draft Jarrett Culver, split their cap to sign Darren Collison and Ed Davis, and then re-sign Kelly Oubre. And the second scenario is they trade number 6 and Josh Jackson for Spencer Dinwiddie. And then with the PG spot already filled, they signed Mirotic and re-signed Kelly. So basically, would you rather get Culver and then get like kind of like a okay PG in power forward, or would you rather trade the 6th pick in JJ for Spencer Dinwiddie and then with the PG slot filled, they get like a better power forward?
So Mirotic was actually one of the names I was thinking about earlier with giving maybe a little bit of overpay in short term instead of Randle. But I would still go with Culver here, that option 1, just because he has more upside than Dinwiddie. Obviously, there's a chance that he might not be as good as Dinwiddie currently, but with a team like Phoenix, I'd still rather play the upside card, and I really, really like the fit of Culver, Michael, and Booker with those 3, because I'm on the path where I would like to see them use Booker more as the lead guard, or continue to do so, and I think Culver can be a really good secondary, and then also just having 2 really good defensive wings surround Booker is ideal, so I would definitely go with A.
David?
Yeah, I mean, by putting Culver in that option, it's pretty hard for me not to pick that one, Max, but Ross just made both of us happy there by saying Booker should be the primary initiator, which is something that you are very much on board with, and I'm becoming on board with a guy like Culver, and Bridges on either side of him is a massive reason of why I would love Jarrett Culver on the Suns, but particularly if Culver or Clark are on the board at 6, I'm definitely not trade the pick scenario for the Suns. And if you can get guys like Darren Collison and Ed Davis in shorter term to plug those gaps whilst keeping another prospect, which, we need to keep bringing that youth through and seeing who we can hit on here, because we need more stars on this team. Booker and Ayton aren't going to be able to do it all by themselves. So I'd definitely be going with option 1 there.
I'm with you guys. It's probably closer for me than it is for you guys. I think Dinwiddie and Mirotic would just help an incredible amount. But
it would be awesome. It would be very awesome. Don't get me wrong.
These are the 2 good scenarios. My questions later will be less good. So enjoy this one. All right, Ross. Let's move on. Washington Wizards. I think the underrated loser of the lottery. Going number 9. What are they doing here?
Before you go, Ross, I'm going to jump in here as the Boston Celtics and see if there's any interest in the Washington Wizards, who need plenty of youth on their roster to take 14, 20, and 22 off their hands for pick 9.
14, 20, and 22?
That's what you offer, David. You can't take it, no take backsies.
Probably shouldn't have shown all my cards from the start there. So yeah, let's go with that.
Yes, absolutely. I would do it if we want to rescind it a little bit. I would do it for 14 and 20. I would do it for 14 and 22 also.
You've saved
David,
me there a little bit.
Do you want to throw in Jason Tatum, David?
All right. Well, I guess to make my point here, if Ross is willing to go with the 14 and 20 and save me a little bit, I think if a guy like Darius Garland is sitting on the board, high upside guy, I could see the Boston Celtics, who probably really shouldn't use all these first round picks for their own roster, trying to trade up. There was that story a few years ago of Ainge trying to offer probably more than I just offered to get up for Justice Winslow, and I could see him doing a similar thing in this situation. So if we did execute that trade, I would go ahead and draft Darius Garland at number 9 for Boston.
Ross, I want to hear you react to this. I mean, first of all, I'll just real quick say that I would love it, and I would be like, Boston's the smartest team in the world if they did this. But how would you react to this trade if Boston made it? Because I know you're not a Garland guy, but Boston's a notoriously good, I say notorious, everyone hates Boston, a notoriously good team at developing players. So how would you feel about this trade if it happened?
I think value-wise, Washington would be the winner, but Garland in Boston would be a lot of fun, being around bigger wings also. I was actually considering Garland, probably was going to take him here at 9, but just the value of moving back to find guys that are similar, because like my tier 3, which is around like 6 through 20 or so, it's all so close in this draft. So you could convince me Garland, like team-wise, if he was there at 4 for the Lakers, he'd be higher. He'd be higher than my actual like personal board at 13 for somebody like the Lakers. So I would like it for both sides to a certain extent. Definitely more for Washington, just because more picks and asset in a draft like this. But Garland would be a lot of fun to watch in Boston for sure.
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to me. All right, real quick, I'm going to throw in another one of our little Suns tie-ins, because I had this for Darius Garland. Players very little like him, but I just want to talk about point guards here. So Malcolm Brogdon was asked about his future with the Milwaukee Bucks. He sounded not super certain that he was going to be back there. Ross, we'll start with you, then go to David. What do you think about Malcolm Brogdon's fit in Phoenix?
I would like it a lot. Anytime you can get a player that is good with high IQ, good shooting, good defense, yeah, I would definitely be a fan of that. He'd probably be one of the top 2 or 3 semi-realistic targets for Phoenix, in my opinion, for free agency.
David?
Yeah, he might be the hardest to obtain for the Suns here, Max, and also, therefore, probably the best fit on the Suns, because we can't have nice things. But, he's 26 years old, 42% from 3 last year. Pretty good defender that can guard multiple positions. He's 6'5", with a 6'10" wingspan, I believe, Max. So, wow. Yeah, he kind of ticks all those boxes that we've harped on about for a long, long time about what you want next to Devin Booker. So, it's hard to see the Bucks not matching, offers that are, south of, I guess, $16, $17 million, at least in my opinion. So you get to a point where the Suns have to sacrifice quite a lot, even just to open up that kind of space for that offer sheet. So it's a hard one to see happening, but I would be all for it, Max. How about you?
Yeah, I think the problem is, I totally agree with everything you just said. And I think the problem is you're probably going to have to basically put Milwaukee in the luxury tax to get them to not match.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't looked at the exact numbers of Milwaukee's cap, but I know it's going to take a lot to do that. It's like a near max to do that. And if you're paying Malcolm Brogdon the max, you're kind of getting rid of the value that you are acquiring because that's a lot of money.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think he's less realistic actually than people maybe think he is because he's kind of like one of the smallerish names, I guess. But it's really, really hard to obtain him. I think D'Angelo Russell, who we'll get to, is actually a lot more realistic, whether or not you like him or not. It's just more. I can see more ways where it happens where the Suns will get him.
It would be an interesting comparison if Milwaukee were in a similar situation to Brooklyn, where they might renounce Brogdon to sign someone else. Then it becomes a really interesting discussion between D'Lo and Brogdon and who's the better fit. But we'll get on to Russell a little later, as you said, Max.
Yep. All right, let's go on to the second of Atlanta's 2 picks. David, what's Atlanta doing next?
Well, my board here was Cam Reddish, Grant Williams, and Goja, who has already been taken at number 5 for Atlanta. So I think you start to think fit a little around, I drafted DeAndre Hunter, I got Trae Young, Collins, Huerto at shooting guard. Do you go the upside of, or potential upside of Cam Reddish versus, maybe another role player wing in Grant Williams? I think probably the fact that I took DeAndre Hunter at 8, I'm going to go the upside play here, which I think Travis Schlenk would definitely do. And I'm going to go Cam Reddish at number 10 for the Atlanta Hawks.
I actually kind of like that a lot. Ross, I want to get your thoughts on this one. This is one I was going to skip in terms of player analysis, but now I'm interested. Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter together, to me, it's like you put the super safe guy with the super not safe guy and just see what the hell happens for Atlanta. I actually kind of like that. What do you think?
Yeah, anytime you have a point guard like Trae, it's always good to just stack up on as many wings as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I definitely, I agree with that pick.
So let's move on to my not Cam Reddish focus thing then. So Ricky Rubio, there's reports similar to Malcolm Brogdon's, although I'd say even stronger.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said it to Spanish media that he doesn't feel like a priority in Utah and sort of was suggesting that he will not be there next year.
He was told he wasn't a priority, Max, is exactly what he said.
Oh, is that what he said? He was told that?
He was.
Wow.
He was told that.
Jeez, well, that's tough to hear. David, I know you previously were a big Rubio fan with Phoenix back when, I won't even bring up his name. What do you think about him now as a fit? And also versus the other guys we've spoken about.
Are we just going with the thou shall not be spoken about name from now on in relation to...
Yeah, the Voldemort approach with the Voldemort approach. The coach who shall not be named.
I'd definitely be a lot more in on it if he who shall not be named was still around, because I think the link there would just be, too hard to ignore. But, for me, I kind of cut him off at our current space, so it's around 10 million. So if you can get him in... particularly on maybe like a 2-year contract, maybe with a 3rd-year option of some degree. If you can get him in for that kind of money, I'm still into the idea of Ricky Rubio. If it gets any more than that, I think you need to pass. His market will be interesting. There's not too many teams that need a point guard like him for their current starting 5. So maybe the option of just starting and okay money would be enough for Rubio. I think lots of people have kind of noted that he's regressed a little bit defensively, but I think he'd still be kind of the best point of attack defender Phoenix have had since, probably Eric Bledsoe, but even a couple of years ago, Eric Bledsoe, when he was actually engaged for the Phoenix Suns. And, we really desperately need a stabilizing force in that starting 5 and someone who can kind of command the team and run the show for the new coach. So that's kind of where I'm at with Ricky Rubio, Max.
Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's a good NBA player. He's definitely... I agree with what David said about the contract. I definitely would want to try to keep it as short of a contract as possible, but he's one of the better stopgap options for Phoenix right there, just to see how maybe Melton develops, and then next year is a pretty good guard class. So as long as you're not overpaying or giving him too many years, I would definitely like the option there.
I'm glad you brought up DeAnthony Melton because I feel like Suns fans have kind of forgotten about him.
Yeah.
He didn't have a great last month of the season, I suppose, but he definitely flashed more than a lot of our young players have flashed in recent years. David, I'll throw to you on this one. DeAnthony Melton's still somebody Suns fans should be caring about, right?
100%. And I think he's going to be a guy that Monty Williams really cares about. I've just got a hunch that the way that DeAnthony Melton plays is going to really fit in with the type of guy that Monty Williams is going to want out there on the court. He's smart. He knows what he can bring to the team, and he stays within that lane for the team, and he plays great defense. So, yeah, I'm expecting that to be the type of guy that really flourishes under someone like Monty Williams, who probably didn't flourish as much as we'd hoped under he who shall not be named, purely because that coach, really appreciated more point guard play out of that position. Whereas I think we could see Monty really specialize him in a role and, see him really flourish, hopefully, for the team next season, Max.
Yeah, and the other part of that, I totally agree, is that it seems like Monty's a little more pro-Booker as lead initiator than he who shall not be named was. So Melton would make more sense to him. Ross, real quick, where were you on Melton in the last draft, and what did you see out of him last year?
I was pretty high on him. I actually had him as, if I recall correctly, I think I had him as my third point guard behind Trey and Shea, in front of Sexton and Nakobo. So I definitely really, really liked him coming out. He was one of the better point of attack defenders in the last few years. The shot improved a ton over like the 2-year span. So he's still on like a learning curve and still, gonna have his bumps like all young point guards do. But I really, really like the fit next to Booker, just as kind of like a 3-and-D guy with some creation, and then, as you've talked about, let Booker be lead guard. But obviously it just kind of needs to come down to consistency and shot making for him, but I still am definitely in on him.
All right, number 11. I think this is a fascinating pick for Minnesota, because Minnesota is really a team that everyone kind of saw as like the next one up. And, the Wiggins thing kind of poo-pooed that a little bit. But, Ross, what are you doing here? What are the Minnesota Timberwolves doing with this pick?
I would actually take P.J. Washington in this scenario. Obviously, Brandon Clark should be their number one target, but he is not lasting till here. But, yeah, I would go with P.J. Washington here.
So talk a little more about P.J. Washington, because he's somebody who we haven't talked about a lot in this podcast.
Yeah, he's a guy that's basically next up on my scouting list. So save me a bit of time and everyone here, Ross, and give us your mini scouting report on P.J.
He's somebody who improved a lot from freshman year to sophomore year. Still a little bit worried about some defensive aspects, which the pairing with Towns is a little questionable, but really skilled offensively, is a good shooter. The free throw percentage is a little bit worried, but I like his shot quite a bit. He shot, I think, 42% from three last year. Granted, it was not the biggest sample size. And then he also is just passing is maybe my favorite skill of him. Really good passer at the 4 position. Could probably project to be a dribble pass shoot guy from the 4 position, and I just all around think he's the best player on the board right now for me.
Interesting. So where is he projected to go? A little later, right? Like maybe like later on in the teens. I think that it would be a somewhat surprising pick if Minnesota took him. Is that right?
I think I've seen him as high as 13 to Miami, and then as low as like 18 or 19. So
okay,
it's kind of hard to gauge the range on a lot of these players this year.
Oh, it absolutely is. Like you said, it's kind of a mismatch when you get to the we get past the top of picks.
Yeah.
David, any thoughts on PG Washington, or go ahead and go to Charlotte 12?
No, as I said, a guy that I need to do a bit more of a dig on. So good for Ross to give us a little bit of a window into him there, picking him at 11. But for Charlotte, another interesting scenario here that, they're either going to be rebuilding or retooling, Max. They may be able to reacquire Kemba Walker, particularly if they pay him all the money in the world that he wants. So I guess in that scenario, they'd be more retooling. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to ignore the North Carolina links here to a couple of prospects, and I'm just going to stick with what is both best player available and someone who I think can contribute right away for the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm going to pick Mr. Charity, Grant Williams from Tennessee.
I love it. He's a great player, but he's also somebody we've talked about a whole lot, so I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to use my Ja Morant thing.
Alrighty.
All right, so I don't know if you saw this, Ross. After the trade happened with the Atlanta and Brooklyn, to open up the cap space, there was some, I guess I would describe it as open flirting between Spencer Dinwiddie and Suns Twitter. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So what's interesting is, if Kyrie goes to Brooklyn, I guess there's a chance that D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie all stay there together. I would categorize that as unlikely, because it would be a lot of money to keep all three of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ross, assuming one of these guys is available, Dinwiddie or D'Angelo, and you're going after it as the Suns GM, which one of those guys are you going for?
I think I would go with Dinwiddie just based off cost efficient, and I don't think they're too far off as players. Obviously, D'Lo's a little bit. Is D'Lo younger? D'Lo's a little bit younger at least, but
Yeah, three years.
Okay. Yeah, I'd go with Dinwiddie just because, like I said, it'd be a little more asset friendly and cost efficient.
What do you think, David?
Yeah, I'm leaning Dinwiddie. It obviously comes down to what it would actually cost to trade for him versus the, I guess, potential cost to contract on D'Lo, but I think you're still looking at a pretty wide margin there of $50 or $60 million, even though you would get an extra year out of D'Lo. So, Dinwiddie's not perfect as a fit with the Suns, but he would definitely be an upgrade. And I saw a great point today on Twitter from a friend of the pod and us on Twitter, Mike Allen. Shout out to him if he's listening. But, he made the point that, the team still needs more creation and just putting role players around Booker and Ayton might not be enough in the future, and that was kind of his argument for someone like D'Angelo Russell. I definitely agree with the point from a fundamental standpoint, but I think that maybe they can get that extra creation or impact out of a wing player or a power forward. I'm not so tied into that being from the point guard position. So yeah, I think that Dinwiddie archetype is totally fine with me at that spot, and I think he brings a lot of value for what is a pretty small contract. I think it's around 3 more years for $36 million, and he's got a player option, so maybe it's only 2 years at the end of the day. But yeah, I'd be all in on that one, Max.
Yeah, for me, this is a brain versus heart thing, and because my brain does this, my brain is going to go ahead and justify why my heart wants to take D'Angelo Russell here, and it's really because, although I agree with all your points made, Dinwiddie's on a better contract, well, better than what D'Lo's about to be on. He, in a lot of ways, fits better with Booker, and at least defensively, he's going to be consistent in that way. D'Angelo Russell's the kind of the swing here for me. I get all the issue with him. He's never been efficient as a scorer, largely because he can't get to the free throw line, like literally at all. Like, it shockingly cannot get to the free throw line. Like one of the worst free throw rate guards I've ever seen.
Yep.
But man, the dude can really, really pass and shoot. And I just think if you pair D'Angelo Russell with Devin Booker on offense, and I'll defend the defense in a second here, but on offense, like those are the Suns have not had a pair of guards who can explode that way, and I can't remember how long. Like they would have the potential to like literally just take over games with the shooting, and the ability to pass from each other, and the ability to not have each other be. Because they're both used to sort of being keyed on as kind of lead guards. I think if you have Booker be the lead guard and D'Angelo Russell be the off guard, like that's going to be really difficult to defend. And I think the D'Angelo Russell's sort of negatives on offense, where he's not the guy who can drive in and get fouled, that kind of stuff late. Booker does that stuff. So I think that they would be really good on offense together. And then defensively, although neither one of them has been a defensive stalwart, and Booker's been one of the worst defenders in the league so far. My thoughts on the defense are well thought out here on this podcast. Like he's not a good defender now, but there's reason to believe he could be later. And D'Angelo Russell's actually really shown improvement already. So I think we have enough reason to believe they'll be good.
And has great size too, Max. He's very similar.
Yeah, both of them do.
As we noted with the pod with Cole, I think a few weeks ago, D'Lo basically is the same size as Jarrett Culver in terms of height and wingspan. So many of the reasons why I love Culver with Mikal and Booker, you could pass over to D'Lo. We haven't seen Culver as a defender in the NBA, even though I'd be much higher on his defense translating. But at least with that size and a guy like Mikal Bridges who might be able to guard point of attack for you sometimes, there's at least some mixing and matching there you can do for matchups when you've got that much size in your backcourt.
Yeah, neither one of them is going to get picked on in the playoffs, right? Like you're worried about guys like Trae Young and Isaiah Thomas, who's just going to get targeted every single time on the court. I don't think D'Angelo Russell and Devin Booker are those kind of people. I think they're going to be competitive and they're going to be big. So, all that being said, Ross, poke holes in my argument. You picked Dinwiddie. Why is D'Angelo Russell not going to work with Devin Booker?
I mean, you make good points. Like, I definitely would not dislike D'Angelo with Devin Booker, but I'd just be worried about it capping your defensive ceiling and, just how much space do the Suns have?
They only have $10 million, so they would have to make some moves. They would probably have to either stretch Tyler Johnson or also possibly trade T.J. Warren and Josh Jackson away for nothing. which that's fine with me. But they would need to make some space.
Yeah, I'm very like it was very close for me. So I definitely see all the arguments for D'Angelo Russell also. And I was curious, what do you guys think it would take to get Dinwiddie?
What do you think, David?
It's a great question. I've got a follow-up question, but I'll answer Ross's first here. Before Brooklyn did that trade with Atlanta, I was thinking maybe something around trading back from 6 and picking up a later first-round pick and Dinwiddie and maybe something around that. But it's difficult. I guess it depends what Brooklyn does in free agency, whether they value a guy like, I guess, TJ Warren, whether you give up just a future pick with a guy like Josh Jackson to match salaries. It'd be very interesting, but I don't think Brooklyn would essentially just give him away. I think if it got to a point where they needed to shed his contract, particularly because it is quite a good contract, Ross, I think they would be in a scenario where the Suns would have to offer up a pretty good deal. Max, you've probably thought about this one a little bit more. What do you think?
My answer to this is the same as my answer is to a lot of these types of questions for a lot of teams, and that is, what do those New Orleans Pelicans want? I think Brooklyn's still one of those teams that's trying to position themselves.
Yep.
For a New Orleans Pelicans possible Anthony Davis deal. So if the Pelicans are interested in somebody with number 6, yeah, let's go. I think it's something like that. So it's really hard to know. Ross, I don't know. Did you have an idea in mind when you asked that?
No, honestly, no idea. I was just trying to make the point that I think that D'Angelo and Dinwiddie are very, very close to the point where it would probably come down to what Brooklyn wanted, and if I felt it was too much, I would probably just roll the dice with Russell.
Which is a nice segue into my question here, but Max, is there a scenario where this plays out really badly for D'Lo, where he does get renounced and then there's not much of a market for him and the Suns can get him for cheap, quote unquote? I'm thinking at the moment it's probably around 4 years, $100 million, but is there a scenario where you think it can come significantly down from that and therefore be a little bit more palatable for the Suns?
No. Straight up, no, I don't think so. The only reason why is because there's so many teams with space and not enough players. So I think if Brooklyn does end up renouncing D'Lo, it's not going to be on July 10th. It's going to be because they got their guys early, I would think. Mm-hmm. So I think that D'Lo gets renounced. I would think the over-under is July 2nd. It could easily be July 1st, too.
Yeah.
And, once that happens, it's going to be open bidding. I think Minnesota will be in on it. I think Orlando's in on it. I think Indiana's in on it. All the teams you've heard mentioned, I'm sure they're all in on it. I think the Suns have a great chance to get him because I think he would want to come here because him and Booker seem that they're really in on each other, but it won't be cheap, I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to number 13, Ross, the Miami Heat. What are they going to do here? They're interesting because I think they've been rumored to be trying to move this pick to save some salary because they've made a lot of stupid fucking deals in the past couple of years. So what do they do here? If you're actually going to make this pick, how do they make it?
I would go ahead and just take Kevin Porter Jr. right here. Kind of a divisive prospect here. There's a lot of people lower or a lot of people higher. He's one of the guys that is kind of just talented but hasn't really put it to fruition yet. But Miami is a place that I'd feel pretty comfortable with him being able to develop in a way that he might not be able to in other areas. So I would just go with Kevin Porter Jr. here.
David, what do you think?
That's a really interesting pick, actually. I'm very low on Kevin Porter Jr., mainly for a lot of the reasons that Ross just brought up around being quite a divisive pick. And I've actually nicknamed him Ratbag, which is an Australian slang term for you there for someone who's a bit mischievous and has some character issues. So that's where I sit on Kevin Porter. However, we've talked a lot in these draft episodes around situation and fit, and if you're going to get the best out of the talent from Kevin Porter, which there's undoubtedly a lot there for him, Miami's actually a great spot. I really love that pick.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, it's the one spot you want him to go to the most. I think so Kevin Porter Jr., everybody who watches him can see it. He's graceful. That dude has a lot of fucking talent. He kind of reminds me of Cam Reddish a little bit, just insane amount of talent, but no idea how to actually apply it to what he's doing.
Yeah.
If you're going to send him anywhere, Miami makes a lot of sense. Let's move to another 7 seconds or less question, because I've only watched a game of Kevin Porter Jr. I can't actually speak intelligently on him. Ross, we'll start with you again. So this is going to be another one of these, what's the better offseason result? What would you rather have if you were the Suns? First option, I call this the bad draft, good free agency option. The Suns draft Rui Hachimura at number 6.
Ugh.
And whoever you hate the most at number 32. So the worst possible draft. But then they spend very responsibly in free agency. They get your favorite low-cost power forward target. Could be Aminu, a lot of people like him, but sub in your favorite. And your favorite low-cost point guard option. My favorite's Tyus Jones if he gets to unrestricted free agency because he gets renounced. Say if D'Lo goes there. Whoever your favorite low-cost would be. And then more depth, too. You get Seth Curry. You get like a great killer offseason. But your other option is you kill the draft. They take your favorite prospect at 6 and 32. Mine's Brandon Clark, Grant Williams. But they're horribly irresponsible in the offseason free agency. They get their least favorite overpaid player. It could be Julius Randle, whoever. And they don't do well filling out the other holes. So basically, what do you pick? Do you pick the F free agency or the F draft?
Miserable options here.
Oh, yeah.
I think I would go with the bad draft and good free agency just because, it puts you on the books for less money and you'll still have at least a little bit more wiggle room with what you're able to do with assets and stuff like that, even though you're not going to have cost control for the rookies. The rookies won't be really good. Cost control won't matter as much there, but yeah, I think I would go with good free agency, bad draft, just because it gives you a little bit more leeway with decisions.
David?
I hate you for this question, Max. There's really no good choice here, but I'll go the other angle just because I think the Suns are still in a position with 6 and 32 if it's a guy like Grant Williams to add 2 really, really good young pieces. But, we're talking, at least from my point of view, would be, Culver and Grant Williams. The bad free agency, depending on how bad exactly it is, you could always get off of or change in the future. And I'm still quite high on this pick number 6 if it falls the right way for the Suns. So I'd be looking to add another potential long-term all-star on this team. So I'll go with that option, but I don't love it either way.
There's no way to love it either way. I think this pick was traded.
Correct.
Right. So number 14 is going to be Washington's pick now. Ross. Who was Washington picking number 14?
So I'm going to go with Jackson Hayes, who was actually the person that I was battling with myself between him and Garland for number 9. So pretty happy how that turned out. But yeah, I would pick Jackson Hayes here.
Yeah, I like that pick. David, have you watched Jackson Hayes at all?
I have watched Jackson Hayes through watching a few Texas games. As we've mentioned on this pod before, I am a poor Texas fan. So I did catch a few games during the season and then have watched quite a few prospects up against Texas as well. So that's kind of my window into Jackson Hayes at the moment, plus 1 or 2 other games while I was traveling for Jackson. I really like him. I like him around this range. I like him going to a team like Washington now, I suppose, where he can kind of develop and has a spot to fall into if everything goes right. I think he's a difference maker. I've nicknamed him Anarchy, mainly because of his first name, Jax, being the main character from Sons of Anarchy, and the last bit of his name being Son. So that is my main point with him. But I think there's also a nice tie in there because I think he can wreak havoc. He's a young guy, still developing, still very much fitting into his body. He's very small up top in particular, but you watch him, he's got those eye-catching plays. He makes blocks from nowhere. He's great finishing around the rim. I think he's a great modern-day kind of rim-running center. So, yeah, I think, around this level of the draft, the late lottery, I think you should be taking a guy with the upside of someone like Jackson Hayes over, I guess a guy like Rui Hachimura or something like that. So, yeah, I'd be in on the pick, and particularly from the trade for Washington's standpoint, where they've got a few shots at this in the lottery and a little bit later now after that trade, Max.
Yeah, my take on Jackson Hayes is that if the Suns had taken not a center last draft, and I'm not going to expound on that further, but had the Suns not taken a center in the last draft, I would have been all over Hayes at 6, I think. I think he would have been perfect to complement, a non-center from the last draft with this team. I really, really do like him a lot. I think there's a good chance he's going to be a good player. In fact, I can't remember, it was ESPN's advanced stats person. I can't remember his name, Seth somebody. But he had him like the 3rd pick in the draft or something like that. Like an insanely high ranking for this guy. I think it was largely not because he might be a star, but it was largely because it's hard to see how he's not going to be at least a good player given his absurd size and athleticism. So, Ross, I like the pick.
Yeah, Ross, give us a little bit more on Jackson. I think you've probably watched him a lot more than both Max and I combined, and you've picked him here, and you're our expert on the episode. So, what else have you got on Jackson Hayes?
So he was somebody that went to high school near me, so I watched him a few times in high school, and he grew about like 5 or 6 inches from junior year to now, and people were kind of shocked when Kentucky and Texas offered him to begin with, just because he wasn't that great in high school. But
he was a football player, right?
Yeah, he was. His dad is a tight ends coach somewhere. I cannot remember where, but yes, he was a football player. He's a wide receiver, but I think he has a little more upside than he's giving credit for right now. 7-footers with his kind of like coordination and fluidity are pretty rare. And then some people are worried about the assist numbers, but that's sort of just like a Shaka Smart offensive thing. He has actually shown pretty good passing chops, and I have him in my top 10. I really like him. I think that he has a really good touch. He was mid-70s from free throw. I think he has at least a little bit of upside if he gets familiar with shooting threes to potentially be like a average pick and pop kind of guy. So I'm very in on him, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's unanimous. We like Jackson Hayes, so congratulations, listeners. We like a guy who the Suns have no chance of taking. All right, I have one more 7 seconds or less question, and then I think we're done here, right?
Yep.
All right, one last one. This is kind of a weird one. Would you rather, we'll start with Ross again, would you rather the Suns, if you were a Suns GM, would you rather trade the number 6 pick in the draft, the Bucks pick, and a moderately well-protected future Suns first? So, it's probably going to be a late lottery pick, but it could be, a disaster and go really high. If you trade all that, you get number 3 pick to take RJ Barrett, or do you just stay at number 6 and take Coby White?
I think I would stay at number 6 and take Coby, personally. I don't love the fit with RJ and Booker, both kind of guys that project to be lead guards and not great defensively, although Booker, like you talked about, probably has at least a little upside, and same with RJ. But I would stay at number 6 because I also like the top end of the class next year, so I'd be comfortable with staying at 6 and taking Coby.
David?
I'm going to go opposite again here, Max. I don't mind that deal, specifically because I'm still quite high on RJ Barrett. I think, obviously I've got Jarrett Culver at number 2, which automatically makes people think that I don't like RJ, but I've clearly got him as my number 3 prospect in this draft. I've actually moved Brandon Clark up 1 spot over Ja Morant, but I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I can move Brandon above RJ because I still love him as a prospect. And, we've mentioned it many times. You've given me another opportunity to here. At some point, the Suns are going to have to stop drafting young players, and draft picks won't mean so much. So if you're really high on RJ over especially someone like Coby White on the Suns, then I think you do the deal.
Yeah, for me, the kicker is the fact they have to take Coby White if they stay.
Yeah.
That's what makes it easy for me.
Ross, I feel like I did you a bit of a disservice with that trade with Washington and Boston here. So, we've got you on here as our draft guy. So, you've got those picks 20 and 22 as well in the draft. Who's a couple of sleepers you've got for us here that Suns fans should be looking out for, even maybe with our pick 32? But who would you pick for Washington at 20 and 22?
For guys who are there, I feel like Chuma Okeke probably won't end up going that high. But for where Washington is, I would just be, getting best player available and drafting upside. So Taylor Horton-Tucker is definitely a name in that range that I would be looking at. Nickeil Alexander-Walker in that range also. If Romeo Langford falls, but I very highly doubt he'll drop that far. The 20s is where I start to differ very much than what consensus seems to be among like Intel-based drafts. So it's kind of hard for that question right there. But even somebody like Tyler Herro, there's a decent amount of guys that are going in that range that Washington could come away with, and I'd be pretty happy with.
And a few names for Suns fans to look into for maybe possibilities at 32.
All right, that's it for us. Hey, thanks so much, Ross. Ross, plug anything you want, upcoming episodes, upcoming articles, what you got coming?
So I am currently working on a team-based, it's not really a mock draft, I'm doing a team board for every single team, all 30 teams in the NBA, all 60 picks.
Really?
Yeah, me and Ricky are also of the Stepien are working on that currently, so it'll be pretty long. We're about 2,500 words in with still, I think, like 20 teams left. So
that's a lot.
We're currently working on that. That should be coming out within the next week or so. And then obviously I'll have my big board coming out within the next week or so. Just wrote a article on my favorite second round sleeper in the draft, Alan Smilajic. So that just came out. If you guys want to check that out over on The Stepien. And then also just continuing to do weekly podcast episodes on The Stepien as well.
Could you say that name again? Alan who?
Smilajic. He is...
Smilajic.
Yeah, he's a G League player currently, but was not old enough to actually be drafted. So it's kind of like a guy skipping college and signing a G League year. He's just Serbian. So
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Alan Smilajic, everybody. YouTube him. All right, well, so that's it for us. Thanks so much, Ross. I am Max, MCC11 on Twitter. David is at the 4 Point Play on Twitter. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We always appreciate it. David, thank you. This was fun.
Thanks, Ross, and thanks, Max.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course. See y'all later.